Can everyone hear me?
Mm-hmm.
On behalf of Mona and the family, thank you all for being here. And before we get started, just a gentle reminder, please be mindful of social distancing. Thank you for wearing and keeping your mask on while you're here. At the end of the service, Mona has invited those of you who feel comfortable in doing so to meet her and the family at her house.
Outside, in the backyard.
Outside, backyard. You feel free to jump the fence. Mona asked me to read this as a prayer, and I think it's perfect for opening our service today. Death is nothing at all. I have only slipped away into the next room. I am I, and you are you. Whatever we were to each other, that we still are. Call me by my old familiar name. Speak to me in the easy way which you always use. Put no difference in your tone. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh, as we always laugh, at the little jokes we enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me, pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without effort, without the trace of a shadow on it. Life means all that it ever meant. It is the same as it ever was. There is unbroken continuity. Why should I be out of mind because I am out of sight? I am waiting for you, for an interval, somewhere very near, just round the corner. All is well. Friends, we gather here in the midst of nature, which seemingly doesn't care or know why we're here. But we know why we're here. We're here to grieve. We're here to mourn. We're here to offer comfort. We're here to receive care. We are here to give hope. We are here to get love. Now, I am not going to tell you who Carl was. I met Carl, I knew Carl, but not nearly as much as any of you. But I will say, everybody knew when Carl entered the room. Everybody knew when Carl laughed. Everybody knew when Carl had a question. And everybody knew when Carl had an answer. But like today, of all days, everybody knew when Carl left the room. I miss Carl, and I barely knew him. Offer each other memories, stories. Offer each other hope, and through that, strength. Days like these are hard. Admit that. But know also that days can be bright. Carl was proof of that. And as I was reminded, the way we were setting up today would have had Carl rolling around. I am sure.
Yeah.
He's laughing at us right now.
Yeah. Well, you should have done it that way. Yeah. But
I have a song I will play, and then I'll invite Beth up.
Okay, good.
If I could catch a star for you, I swear I'd steal them all tonight, to make your every wish come true, every dream for all your life. But that's not how the story goes. The world is full of perfect plans. If there's a promise that I broke, I know one day you'll understand. When times are hard, I know you'll be strong. I'll be there in your heart, and you'll carry on. Like moonlight on the water, and sunlight in the sky. Fathers and daughters never say goodbye. The angel I will read to sleep gave me one dream of my own. So learn to love and spread your wings, and find the world to call your home. When times are hard, I know you'll be strong. I'll be there in your heart, and you'll carry on. Like moonlight on the water, and sunlight in the sky. Fathers and daughters never say goodbye. When times are hard, I know you'll be strong. I'll be there in your heart, and you'll carry on. Like moonlight on the water, and sunlight in the sky. Fathers and daughters never say goodbye. Fathers and daughters never say goodbye.
Okay, I'll try to do this after that song. I had to write this down because number one, I wanted to make sure I remembered everything I wanted to say. And two, because I did get the gift of gab from my dad. So my father was so convinced that I was going to be a boy that he bought this little pair of blue squeaky boxing gloves when my mom was pregnant with me. The funny thing is though, even though I came out wearing pink, he still taught me how to be a fighter through the years. His lessons were not always ones that I liked or ones that were even good, but they made me the strong, independent woman that he was so proud of. He fostered my love of the sciences as a child. I remember him taking us late at night, while we all complained, very late at night, to a friend's house who had a powerful telescope so that we could see Halley's Comet, which then in turn made me want to be an astronaut. So he bought me a telescope. We went to midnight star parties at Antietam Battlefield, and he sent me to space camp. He was always coming up with the ideas for our science fair projects. The ones that were my favorite were the desalination of all ocean water using the sun, and does light bend. Of course, his projects, not my project, his project, always had to be professional looking. So he went to Alcoa and would print out the big fancy title boards for our trifolds, and because they had some kind of professional printer there that now is just replaced by a Cricut. He always found an opportunity to teach me something about science. I remember him bringing home these really strong magnets from East Alco and iron shavings for me to play with when I was probably about 8 years old. We were also probably one of the minority of the households in the 1980s that had a computer. He taught me about weather and not to fear the storms as far back as I can remember, by sitting on the porch in thunderstorms and counting time between the flash and the boom. In 6th grade, we were starting to learn about the periodic chart, so he borrowed a big chunk of bauxite from East Alco. He apparently stole a lot of stuff from there. Borrowed a lot of stuff from East Alco. There was a chunk, it was like this big, and gave it to me, and to take it into my 6th grade science teacher, who was just shocked that an 11-year-old child walked in with a 2-pound chunk of bauxite from Australia. But I think my favorite science-related memory, technically not science, was of something called pitch pond. I can't remember now what he had gotten it for, but he had gotten this bottle of acetone from the lab at East Alco. And it was in a bottle, a thick plastic bottle that somebody had written pitch pond on. Those of you that work for Alco might know what pitch pond is. I have no idea. But it had old black ink on it that said pitch pond. And he was using it to fix something that I don't remember now what it was. But I didn't know what was in it, so I called it pitch pond. It used to drive him insane when we would call it that. And he explained many, many times that the pitch pond was a place at the plant, not a physical substance. You know, that, no, it doesn't matter. This is now pitch pond. He'd go out there, oh, you want the pitch pond? That's not pitch pond. The pitch pond is a place at the plant where somebody wrote something on this bottle. And then he would just huff and roll his eyes. But apparently we did lots of things that exasperated him to his kids. Like the time that I learned that Wendy's used aluminum in their burger wrappers because I set the microwave on fire. Or how I created what I called experiments. Actually, I think I call them experiences. Out of anything I could find, food and all, and would put it in a cup in the windowsill in the kitchen for a few days just to see what would happen. And they would get gross and moldy and flies, and he would put up with it because he knew I was interested in science. Oh, and he also loved when I would take something apart and then forget how to put it back together. Or when he taught me just enough electrical knowledge to be dangerous. Also, I can't forget the time that I ran over a $60 silver maple tree with a lawnmower when I was about 14. It wasn't my fault though, because the cute neighbor boys were out. And I wasn't paying attention to where I was going. I thought he was going to kill me for that one, because not only did I run over it, but when I realized what I had done, I hit the brakes and was sitting over top the tree, just chopping it up. I remember him babying that stupid thing the rest of the summer, and him telling me it was coming out of my allowance if it died. We of course played the thermostat game that is universal in every dad-child relationship. My sisters and I would turn up the air and he'd turn it back down. We'd turn up the heat and he'd turn it down. My younger sister and I, during the summer, I can't believe we did this, would set it at 65 during the day, during the summer, and then set a timer on the stove about 30 minutes before he got home from work so we could go set it back up to 72. he would still walk back in the house and be like, "Why is it so cold in this house?" And we would tell him, "Oh, it's because you had your windows down driving home from work. You're just warm." As many as you all know, he could be quite the prankster and like to play. I think I have post-traumatic stress syndrome and anxiety from all the times he used to pop out of somewhere and scare us as kids. I remember he convinced me once that the lights and the air moving around from spotlights were actually alien ships. We used to love to tease each other about sports. He was always a Cowboys fan, which is difficult growing up living 50 miles from Redskins Stadium. Once he moved to Texas and the WVU would play Texas Longhorns, those jokes began. I would send him pictures of a Mountaineer mascot grilling steaks, or the horns down, on a game day, and then he would send me pictures of the score updates. I didn't like that part because we usually got our butts kicked. We would tease each other about the weather too. Just a few weeks ago, he sent me a picture saying it was 100 degrees with feeling like 111 with the humidity, and he asked if I wanted to come for a visit. I told him it was not natural for people to live in those kind of temperatures, and that it was a gorgeous 80 degrees with lows in the 60s in West Virginia. We agreed that winter came though, that he would be the nice weather winter though, because he wasn't down for the -degree weather and wind chills. My father was an animal lover. Of course, he and Mona has had their fair share of cats over the years, but I can remember him making caskets for little goldfish out of ring boxes, and burying them, and then helping us eat the popsicles for a little wooden cross. He fed baby skunks that lived down the road from our house dog food when he realized that the mama had been killed on the road. I wanted to bring them home. He said no. He said, "They're fine down the road. We'll feed them down the road." But he made sure that they had food. He always avoided what he called the kamikaze bun-buns that would run across the road, little rabbits that would run across. And even though he rolled his eyes and chuckled when I came home crying the first time I hit an animal, he sympathized with me over that poor possum. He thought my boyfriend had broken up with me. I came home that upset. I have so many more memories with him and of him. I was going to tell you about the story when his shoes got wet at Disney World and they stunk so bad that we made him put them out on the balcony. Then they still stunk, so he decided that he was going to dry them with the hair dryer, and that just forced hot, stinky air through the entire hotel room. Or the time that he got so excited to see a trolley in Boston that his words came out jumbled, and he said something that sounded like he should have been a little German boy wearing lederhosen. Or how we had to devise booby traps in the freezer so he wouldn't eat our ice cream. But I don't want to embarrass him. When I was pretty little, I remember hearing the MASH theme song come on at bedtime and being warm and safe. Although I'm never going to get to say the things I wanted to say or do some things with him that I wanted to do, I still have that warm and safe feeling that he taught me how to have on my own, and the humor to keep me laughing even through the tears.
You can leave it up. I'll say something and then let Rip and talk. I will pull this down so you can hear me okay. Anyway, thank you for those of you identifying who you are, because I'm going, it's like Carl used to say if he'd see somebody at the mall from East Elko and go, "Who is that?" And they go like this, "Oh, with the hard hat," because they look different, so that's how they look. Anyway, start with a quote. I found this. It's by Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451. "Everyone must leave something behind when he dies," my grandfather said. "A child, or a book, or a painting, or a house, or a wall. built or a pair of shoes made or a garden planted, something your hand touched some way so your soul has somewhere to go when you die. And when people look at that tree or that flower you planted, you're there. Carl had spent this time at home building and making things. He put up a new wooden fence. He put in a new metal fence. He built me a huge planter box, raised up planter box. He put in a stone walkway. And never to be defeated, our gas grill died, but rather than just throwing the whole thing away and buying a new one, he took it apart, got some wood to make a new platform. He had a portable one that he'd never used. He got that, mounted it on, and we now had a new grill for, I think, the $10 that the wood cost us. But anyway, but he made it. When we were setting up, and I made the comment that this would have driven him crazy, the kind of loose whatever. Back when we lived in Maryland, the church we went to would have a church supper every spring and every fall. We did it at the fire hall because we didn't have room at the church. But we could not set up until Thursday evening after bingo. So it's 10 o'clock at night. All the volunteers would be there to help set up. But they all knew they had to wait until Carl and the other engineer, Brooks, got the tables set just right. They had a ruler, so they were all exactly the same distance from each other. When all the tables were set to their satisfaction, then everybody else could come in and do whatever. When Beth talked about him jumping out and scaring, he tried that with me, but the cats would always give him away. He would hide so he could jump out at me, and the cats would be, all I had to do is look where the cats were looking, and there he was. So, but we used to say we loved to travel. We like to travel to not just your normal places. His mom said once she was glad he found somebody who was as crazy as he was. But we would always say that we loved to travel. We wanted to travel when we could. We could now, and we travel now. So many people say, well, we're going to do that when we retire. I'm so glad that we did not wait until we retired. I think we went on probably 25 trips at least, and our latest one that we had just come back from was Namibia, where we climbed the Big Daddy sand dune. But anyway, so I'm so glad that we did all of that traveling, had all of those adventures, and as I said, he's probably rolling over now, going, oh my gosh, they don't have those chairs set up exactly 6 feet apart, all of them. But anyhow, I'm going to ask my son to say something, and then my granddaughter is going to play. She's going to do country roads. He always said he was a country boy, so I figured that would be appropriate. After that, I would like anyone who wants to please come up, share any memory. For some of you guys that work with them, just keep it clean. Anyhow, anyone who wants to share a memory, this is about us sharing our time with Carl. He was always, it seemed like he was always laughing, and when I went back looking at pictures and whatever, it's like, doggone, he's got a big grin on him in every one of those pictures. So, have my son Bippin is going to say something, Olivia will play, and then please just come up, and whoever wants to say anything about Carl, and then we will finish up with Sparky playing. And anyone who feels comfortable coming over to our house, it's in the backyard. The music club, Matinee Musical Club, has been very gracious in making sandwiches. We have servers so you do not have to touch any of the food. It will be put on your plate for you. And so you can, anyone who can, and you can admire some of the handiwork that Carl has been doing. He was so proud of his backyard. So, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Know what a klutz I am.
Deal. Thank you everyone for coming here this afternoon. Beth, thank you for sharing all those memories. I wrote some stuff here, but I was just reminded of a time when my mom and Carl had come up to visit us over Christmas, and I enjoyed electronics myself, and I asked Carl's expertise to help me with something, and he insisted that I had done all the soldering incorrect, and so we sat there and resoldered the entire thing with the right way to do it, and my novice hands while he was holding the wires, and I looked over at him and he had this wince, this grimace look on his face, and I was like, "What's wrong?" He's like, "It's really hot, hurry up." But no matter what, he was there, and he wanted to teach and to do the job right. So these are just some thoughts that come up when I think about Carl. Carl had a spirit and an energy that was one of a kind. It preceded him, and it lingered long after he left. He could light up the room with his chuckle. The aura of his joy resonated and infected those who had the privilege of his presence. He had a determination and a motivation to get the max out of life and every experience, everything. He was what I would call a project hound too. If there was a table saw or a power tool that went off anywhere in a quarter mile radius, you could be sure Carl would be there shortly to see what you were working on and lend a hand. No job was too big or challenging for Carl. For Carl, work was the experience of life embodied, and that experience was something to be cherished and enjoyed with no exceptions. His smile, his laugh, and his mannerisms confirmed that his heart was filled with love and with joy. He never shied away from a new experience. On our travels, there was always something that excited him that he wanted to do. And from the love that he showed, the love and admiration that he showed my mother, and the gentle care and unconditional love that he gave to Hobbs and to their other cats, it never took anyone very long to understand that Carl was filled with love. Carl, I love you. I'm going to miss you. Thank you.
Can you fix it for her?
I can also do it. Can you hear me okay?
You can put it up just a little bit. There you go.
This keeps sliding down, I'm sorry. Okay. But then, wow.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay, let's try that again.
Almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah River, life is old there, older than the trees, younger than the mountains, blowing like a breeze. Country roads take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia, mountain mama, take me home. Country roads, all my memories gather round her. Mine is a lady, stranger to blue water, dark and dusty, painted on the sky, misty taste of moonshine, teardrop in my eye. Country roads take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia, mountain mama, take me home. Country roads, I hear a voice in the morning and she calls me. The radio reminds me of my home far away. And driving down that road, I get a feeling that I should have been home yesterday. Yesterday, country roads take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia, mountain mama, take me home. Country roads take me home. Country roads take me home. Country roads.
There are some people in this world that have it, whatever it is. There are people that we meet or know of that inspire, they drive us, they give us hope to try things we might never try, simply because of who they are, how they act, what they do. You might say that these people are larger than life. Carl was larger than life. And the few times that I engaged with him, I knew it. You all know it. There was something about his presence that drew people to him. He was larger than life. So much so, when my wife and I were performing at the K Theater, we're going to play our instruments and sing a song, and we told everybody the song was going to be Kodachrome. And I saw, just out of the corner of my eye, Carl start to fidget. And when you're playing in front of a bunch of people, you really kind of don't want to make eye contact, because I guarantee you're going to forget what you're singing. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw Carl start to fidget. We started to play the song. He moved a little bit in his chair, and the first lyrics go, when I think back on all the crap I learned in high school, Carl jumped up and said, yes! Yes! Larger than life. And he was so full of positive energy. I loved that he couldn't hold it back. I truly will miss Carl.
Do you want to see if anyone else wants
Yes,
to
if
say?
anybody would love to share
You
a
wanna say
story,
something,
if you want to channel Carl, and do it from where you're sitting, then just release your story. Otherwise, I'll set up this microphone. You can come up and share a story. When the stories are done, I'll come back and remind everybody what the logistics are for the rest of the day. There I go.
Yep. Don't be shy.
So I'm Clint Mann. I was Carl's apprentice at Point Comfort, and I wanted to share what's a memory that stands out to me a lot is my first 2 interactions ever with Carl, because I was convinced he hated me. Fairly fresh out of college, I go in for the interview. A couple of people there. Carl's there asking me hard questions, and tangentially hard questions. If I don't know the answer to A, I don't know the answer to A plus B either. And so I get out of there finally, and I bombed it. No way I'm ever coming back. And I'm waiting for a plant tour, and one of the people in the automation and controls office asked me how my interview went. And I said, well, you know, I think Brenda and Mark liked me okay, and that guy Carl, he really didn't like me. And they say, oh, don't worry about it. That's just Carl, don't worry about it. So fast forward a couple of weeks, I get the job, and I'm being led around by the guy who was managing the engineers. And he says, congratulations, you're sharing an office with Carl. The one guy who didn't like me. Turns out I was entirely wrong. Easily the best thing that ever could have happened to me, and not only career-wise, but personality, an interesting person, getting to learn not only stuff related to the job, but planning trips, how to take care of cats. We both love theater, so it ended up being a blessed experience for me, certainly, but I didn't think it was going to turn out that way. I was scared to death.
Good afternoon. Such a shame that Carl is just looking down on us and can't be with us to enjoy the laughter and the praise that we're heaping on him. I don't know how he would have felt about it. He might have turned a little red in the face if we lavished it on him in person. Carl and I were in a thing, so I was mechanical, he was electrical, and there was some projects going on, and we were working really hard, really long hours, and he worked long hours anyway. Clint was part of the team, and I remember I'd go in the office and he and Clint were almost always arguing. The point about this, and they were drawn on the wall, and you know, it's this way, no, it's that way, and Clint would say, "You're wrong, old man," and Carl would just shake his head. But those were the fun things. But Carl would never hesitate. He never thought that he was so high up in the organization that he couldn't grab a tool and go out there and get the job done. So we were late at one night, and my air compressors, my new air compressors that he had helped me spec out, weren't working right. We just got adjusted a little bit. Come on, he grabbed his tools, and I'm like, I think this is supposed to be a union, people. And he's like, nah, come on. And just took it upon himself to teach me how to do it, so that, you know, if he wasn't around next time, he could rely on me to pick up the mantle. And I think that's the way he mentored people, and I really appreciated that, and just loved his laughter. And when he left us, it was definitely silent in the halls. It's definitely silent. We missed him. Thank you.
those of you that don't know who I am, I'm Alan Sanders. I've lived in Rockville a number of years, and 14 of those years, Carl and Mona were neighbors to Shelley and I. It really didn't seem like it was 14 years. It was, he and I were talking, it hadn't been that long ago, about him living there for 14 years. I said, hey, you haven't lived there 14 years. And he said, well, yeah. Started thinking, well, yeah, it's been that long. But I know some of you, of course, Clint, I sort of agree. I know what you're talking about. As far as Carl is concerned, when he and Mona first moved in, of course, we met, and I'm sure those of you that knew Carl, he could have a fairly strong personality. And I've been accused of that myself, to be quite honest. At least my wife has reminded me of that from time to time. And to be quite honest with you, we probably didn't see eye to eye, probably for about the first 5 years or so at least. But in the last 8 years, how long it's been, I don't know who it was that finally said, hey, you know, we need to take care of this. What is the problem? And he and I were able to talk, and we started talking, and developed a very, very good relationship and a good friendship. And I do know what you mean as far as him willing to do whatever you needed for him to do, or what he wanted to do for you. Because anytime I had a project or if I had anything going on, Carl would, if he saw me, would be out there, hey, what do you need? Do you need a tool? And of course he had every tool in the book. And of course, I don't know if you've been in his garage, but it's amazing how many tools this gentleman had. And he was always willing to lend a hand and help any way that we needed him to. Now, of course, when the shoe was on the other foot and he would be doing something and I would offer my assistance, you know, he was, oh, no, I got this. And I finally figured out, well, it's not necessarily that he didn't really want me helping him, it's just he didn't want me messing something up. I mean, I finally figured that one out, and I said, okay, girl. And I would still offer, but it was always, oh, I got this. And he did. And he didn't, Mona mentioned earlier about his backyard. He started, but he always wanted my opinion. I mean, that was, if I would be out in the yard or whatever, I mean, he would, hey, Alec, come here, look at this. Tell me what you think about this. And he was putting in the privacy fence, and he was telling me exactly how he was doing it. And he had it to the umpteenth, how exactly, wherever, whatever, and he was able to put it all in, and it looked great. I mean, there's no doubt about that. There wasn't anything the guy couldn't do. Then he wanted to put in the wrought iron in the front. And he called me over, yeah, come look at this, and that's, you know, he was doing an outstanding job. And of course, I related that to him. And I know he appreciated it, but I always appreciated him, you know, wanting my opinion, whether it was something he would do or not. But, you know, he was always good to do that. And we're definitely going to miss him.
I'm Wayne Cotton, and I was Carl's neighbor on the other side. And I've had lots of neighbors over the years, and Carl was the best one I've ever had. I've had a lot of neighbors, and not many of them were that way. In fact, he was my best friend. I loved him.
My name is David Taher. I've known Carl 30 years. He was electrical maintenance planner at East Alco. When I was interning, going to college, I'd spend my summers, Christmas breaks, Thanksgiving breaks, all my time at East Alco. And he gave me a real appreciation of the electrical side. And I'm a wrench at heart. Stayed with mechanical, but I always respected what he brought. He brought practical. It wasn't just there, but it was also a perfectionism to the way work should be done. And as history shows, I did not have a very good relationship with Alcoa. And he talked me through a lot of it and helped me see that my path was better suited elsewhere. But we became very close friends. I thought of him as a brother. He called my mother Mom, my sister Sis. And Mona and Carl and I and my parents and my sister and we put together a whole entourage and went to Egypt in March of '01. My father was from Egypt. And, we were taking a cruise up the Nile, 7-day cruise, and it would travel and then stop at various sites. And there were windows, maybe 4 or 6 hours, where the ship was traveling, where we had free reign to go wherever we wanted on the ship, do whatever we wanted while we were in between stops. And most people would go up on the top deck where there was a swimming pool and they'd take in the sun and enjoy. Carl, my father, and I were downstairs in the bar, not touching a bit of alcohol, which was one of the things that amazed the Egyptians. They thought all Americans drank alcohol left and right. And we sucked down enough Turkish coffee to power an aluminum plant. They actually would start to cut us off when we were hitting like 18 each. And we were playing backgammon, and I think some of us could actually move the parts with our mind at that point. 15 years ago, this week, Carl helped me bury my father. He was one of the pallbearers. And I remember seeing the tears well in his eyes when I asked him, "I'll miss my brother."
I'll come on up, Marlon. Hey, let's see what this mug looks like a little bit. I'm sorry for that, but
I got it. Oh, when I called you. Of course, after Carl died, very unexpectedly, of course. So I'm calling some of his friends. Well, I'm calling from his phone, because that's where the numbers are. Nobody knows any phone numbers, right? So I'm calling from his phone. These two guys, if you listen to them, you'd think they were worst enemies. I mean, the way they would insult each other. So I call, and of course, Mark sees Carl's name on there, so he answers the phone with an insult. And then he hears my voice, and knows something's wrong. So, anyway.
yeah, I had to tell my boy, tone it down. I wasn't about to talk to you like that. My name is Bart Harrell. I worked with Carl at Alcoa and Point Comfort, and it was a pleasure. Yes, we teased and cut up one another brutally. We would walk out in the hall and see each other, and one or the other would always say, "Who let that out in the hall?" Or "Where did you get a head like that on that walking through the hall?" Anything that we could come up with to insult or abuse one another, because we took fun and pride in it. And then Carl would get mad if he couldn't come up with something to come back with. And he'd just say something ordinarily. I remember the first time I met Clint, and I was in his and Carl's office, and Carl and I had been in there before, and when Bill Markle came in and talked, Bill came up and looked at us, and I'd been cutting up with Carl, and we were ignoring Clint. And Bill says, "Mark, it's time to go away. I've got to have a meeting. Don't go away mad, just go away." Well, fine, I'll go be away. We'll go back to my office. A little while later, Bill comes down to the office and he says, "Hey, Clint wanted me to come by and see you, make sure you weren't feeling upset because they were afraid that I'd insulted you and hurt your feelings." Yeah, I still remember that, Clint, so I got your number pegged. I looked at Bill and said, "Which feeling? He hurt me?" "Okay, well, I don't remember." We had joy and communion and camaraderie. Carl's the one that convinced me to buy that RV that I parked down at Point Comfort, that I still have, I can't get rid of. But Carl would be an inspiration. He was a point of reference. He's always there to lend a hand. Carl was a unique individual in many ways in that he had a good relationship with people. He could relate, encourage, and inspire people. Yet he was able to do mechanics, whether it be electrical or mechanical tasks, and he did it with perfection and pride. I would think in many ways that the biggest thing about Carl is that he took pride in everything he did. Not just his work and the appearance of the job, the functionality of the work, and how the longevity would go through, but also that relationship with others. I missed Carl already. When Mona called me that morning, I was thinking to myself, I haven't talked to him in too long. I need to hear how he's doing. Of course, it was devastating news. I talk about how Carl and I would insult one another. I'll share this with you. When Simon Butterworth, who was president of global production for Alcoa out of Australia, came over the first time, he heard Carl and I insulting each other in the hallway. He looked at us kind of strange. You know, we're talking about a president of the division for Alcoa Global. And he traveled to Point Comfort to do an update. That was one of his plans. So we came over, we just talked to him, said, yeah, you can join in with this insult too if you want, Simon. We don't care. The next trip, Simon came by. Carl and I had to be walking down the hall. This time we weren't necessarily insulting one another, but Simon looked at us and said, oh no, you two again? On many occasions, over the last 4 years now since we left, I've called and checked up on Carl. He's checked up on me. He's been in my house. I didn't make it to his. I'm gonna change that today, Mom. Y'all had invited us many times. And he always told me, don't ever call me unless you have an insult. Don't deny me that insult. So, Mona, we're not gonna pass those along with you. That tone's changed. That was Carl. But folks, we were each touched and blessed by his personality, his character. And that was one of the things I enjoyed too with Carl. We had a task one night, and Robert was out there, and then Clint, I believe, saw, even Lisa may have been out there that night. We had lost power down in digestion because it tripped one of the wires. They stayed out there till 11, 12 o'clock at night that night. Finally got the power back on. We had brought some supper in for everybody to at least get something to eat. But the two oldest guys in the group, I looked at both of them and said, I don't see you until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning at the earliest. Don't you walk in here tomorrow, because I need you to get some rest, because I want you to be ready to come back the next day or two. Carl he wouldn't listen. What he did, he was at 6 o'clock in the morning, he's already over there. And I look over and there's Robert too. So a lot of good that did. But that's what we enjoyed with Carl. So when he got through that day, of course, he went home that Friday afternoon, so he'd come back and see Mona. What he was looking forward to that week, get off work and go home and see Mona. We've been encouraged, and I hope each and one of you have a special memory of a time, a relationship, even an event or some task that you got to see him do, or a product that you saw Carl perform for you. But those are the memories that we all cherish, and that's what he would want you to know about him too. I'm glad to have been here, be with him.
I'm Laurel, and I am a friend of Mona's through work, and so I know Carl through Mona. And one of the things that always stood out to me about Carl was the pride that he took in Mona's talent for acting and how much he dedicated to her craft through the Milam Community Theater. And the times that I went to watch Mona perform, whether it was with my family or with a friend, he made sure we had popcorn, we had drinks, we had front row seats. He was just so excited to share his excitement for what Mona was doing with us. And it always just showed me that she was such a gem in his life. And over the years, seeing, sharing an office with Mona, hearing her come back with stories about his excitement about time that he spent with family, and having Olivia come into his life, just things that added additional joy to Mona and Carl's life, and appreciated the things that I learned about Carl through Mona, and the times that we had the opportunity to share lunches or parties or activities with him too.
I'm Robert Schaefer. I know Carl from work. Know Clint and Mark too. Carl and I met, I think it was at a high voltage safety training. We kind of hit it off, got to talking with each other, became friends, went out to eat a couple of times there, and over the years we met up again. One of the times we were going to do a safety audit in Jamaica, and so made arrangements to meet up and at one point fly together so we could have a dinner and talk. And I got to Jamaica and having dinner, and my boss called me and said I needed to be back at the plant. So I left Carl there, and I think he never forgave me for that, because left him in Jamaica to do the audit himself with another guy, and I never heard the end of that one. And when he came to Point Comfort and started working with me, he made me pay for that every day. And like Mark and Clint, Carl and I, love to trade insults with each other and gig each other about whatever it was that we weren't doing right. We made it a challenge when we reviewed each other's work to make mistakes or to find mistakes. Of course, my answer to him, and he kind of gave the same one back, is I left that there to test you. Just to make sure you were looking and would follow it. One of the other things Carl said when you insulted him was, you'd hurt my feelings if I had any. And that was, heard that many, many times, but I know Carl had a lot of feelings, and he was a great guy. We worked together, valued his input. He bounced things off of me, I did to him all the time. And a few times off site too. So I want to miss Carl. I'm glad he's got, everybody here is going to miss him too. Shows what kind of great person he was. So.
You guys are just gonna have to bear with me. My wife says I'm nothing but a big softie. Carl called me that too a couple of times. Beth, I'm gonna give you a different side of the story that you got your side of it. Well, I'm the mechanical guy that he came to work with at Rockdale. I was the mechanical guy in the cast house. He was my electrical reliability engineer. And David, I think you're the right David, but because he kept referring to David. He goes, you treat me like David. He would come in with these elaborate plans of what he wanted me to design for him. And I'd let him go through it. I go, okay, Carl, what are we trying to accomplish now? And he'd tell me. I go, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do this, 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 and this. And start drawing it on the board with him. He'd look at me, I hate you, storm out of the room. He took pride in it all, and he just wanted it all to be this. And I'm a simple guy. The less moving parts, the less I have to grease, the less reliability issues we have. And I kept reminding him of that. And he'd come in, and I mean, it was all the time. And I got the opportunity to see you, Carl, a couple weeks ago. Because see, I'm also the country boy. I got the farm just in Rogers, right down the road. And he loves spending time out there. And did you guys talk about his heart and how he would jump in on something? I'm stuck in Beaumont, Texas. I got informed my water main broke. My dad goes out and looks at it, and he's like, Dad calls me up and says, well, I'd love to fix it, but I can't do it by myself. I said, give me just a minute. Called Carl. Carl's like, tell him I'll be there in about 30 minutes. You know, I wasn't even gonna be there. He just went out to hang out with my dad and fix my water main for me. That was just the kind of guy he was. He would drop what he was doing to come help. And I understand what you were saying about offering, you know, to go help him. Here, I've got all the carpenter tools and everything. He's trying to do work around the house. It's like, hey, Carl, let me come help you. No, we'll get to it. You know, it was just, his love that he shared was infectious. It was a little strange, took you a little while to get through everything, but it was there, and it was infectious, and it was genuine, and it was permanent. Once you made a friend with Carl, he was your friend. There was no question. I mean, when I've got my dad struggling, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, if Carl was in town, he'd go. And I try and be like that. But we did have our moments like everybody talks about, and I got told I hate you a lot by him, because simplify it. It doesn't have to be so grand, but that's the way he loved to live his life, was grand. I'm gonna miss my brother.
Just one more thing real quick. I just want to thank you guys for all coming out and showing your love for my dad. It's easy to know the stories of the daughter growing up and, like I said, you know, burying goldfish and feeding skunks down the road. But it's hard to know your dad's professional life. Just like I'm sure it's hard for my kids to know me in my professional life. And I knew that he was well respected at work. And you know, that he had a very powerful career. But I didn't know that there were people like you guys that just loved him the way you did. And I can tell you that in turn, he only was mean to you because he was testing you. Because he didn't want to play around with anybody that didn't know what they were talking about. So if he was like, I'm gonna really test this kid, and if he knows what he's talking about, then fine, I'll like him. And if he's not, then that's the end of that. And one thing that I've learned just in the last couple of days hearing people is I apparently get a lot of my humor from him, because I'm the same way at work. I tell people if I'm nice to you, I don't like you. Like, I don't. And if I'm being mean to you and insulting you, then you know that I actually like you. So I must get that from him, and I never even knew I did until not long ago. But just thank you guys for loving my dad. He's a long way from home. You know, Maryland's a long way from here. And so there's a lot of friends and family up there that couldn't make it down here. but he definitely loved it down here, and I appreciate you guys for coming out.
We arrived here today, some of us family, some of us friends, some of us strangers. As we leave today, it's my hope that we feel a new togetherness, no longer strangers because of Carl. Again, a reminder, you're invited if you feel comfortable to go to Mona's house, backyard, outside. Also, a reminder, if you see anything at the house with the name Alcoa on it, it's on loan. Bless each of you, and thank you again on behalf of the family.
Thank you, Sparky.
Go in peace.